Welcome to episode 10 of the High School Golf Podcast. I'm Crystal Morse. This is Ted Bishop. And in this episode, we are going to discuss how important it is to be with your players and coach your players through those seasonal transitions. It's going to be informative. We're going to give you some resources and just some of our knowledge when it comes to indoor training, the spring season, summer tournaments, and whatnot. So, Ted, we're excited to do this podcast. We're looking at snow here in Indiana, and I'm excited to hop into this episode today.
Absolutely. I mean, we're just two PGA professionals sharing information with high school golf coaches. Some may be PGA pros, many are probably not. And I think as you and I talked and did the outline for this podcast, we felt like there were three distinct transitional periods that take place over the course of an entire year. And why don't you talk about those for a second?
Yeah, so right now, our seasons, just to give you an idea, so our girls' season is in the fall, our boys' season is in the spring. So what we're into right now in Indiana is we transition from fall golf, which our fall here in Indiana is nice. We can play through October, November, usually. And then again, there's snow on the ground, so we have to transition to indoor instruction and indoor training, really. And that's going to look different for a lot of people depending on your resources and what you have available. But nowadays, I do feel like there are a lot of indoor hitting facilities opening up. Even here in Indiana, we have, probably 3 or 4 that have just opened up in this area. And a lot of them, I'm sure, would be if the PGA Pro or the high school golf coach reaches out to these indoor facilities, I'm sure they'd be happy to, kind of partner with you and offer some times available for your team. So that definitely needs to be something that you look at if you don't have that available. Here at the Legends, we have the Morse Golf Academy with 3 indoor hitting bays and a putting green. So that is something that we utilize. So I'm going to use that in the discussion kind of as to what we're doing in the wintertime. So there's a couple key points. Wintertime is full of a lot of different activities and training. So first of all, one of the things that we're doing right now is speed training. So swing speed training is definitely an important aspect, especially with our underclassmen, freshmen, sophomore, the younger kids. The older kids can definitely benefit, our juniors and seniors. But I see the speed training being a very effective form of training in the wintertime for those younger kids. Now, a couple resources. Which ones do you like the best, Ted?
Well, Crystal, I like the speed sticks the best. And so I'll talk about those for just a second. Basically, what the speed stick is, it's a golf club that at the bottom of the shaft has got a weight on it that's built into the shaft, and there are 3 different weights. The green shaft is the lightest, the blue is the medium weight, and then the red is the heaviest. Basically, it's a 10-minute workout. I mean, I've been doing these myself over the course of the winter. I will easily break a sweat. It's a pretty rigorous workout for 10 minutes. And I just feel like that it's a great way to strengthen your body, strengthen particularly your core and your chest muscles, and no doubt increase your club head speed. And honestly, you can do it anywhere that's got probably a 12-foot ceiling, or even maybe a 10-foot ceiling, you're in business.
Absolutely. And that is the brand name on that is actually Super Speed Golf. So Super Speed Golf is a good one. They're going to run you around $180 for a set. New one that I got this winter is called the Speed Toad. The Speed Toad is going to run you about $125. It screws into your actual driver shaft. So you're using your own shaft, and it definitely has a kind of a training system. It does come with an app. I've enjoyed it so far. I got my son Carson on it, so I love Super Speed Golf. I've been doing that for years. A little bit more expensive option, a little bit more analytical than these other two is called the Stack System. The Stack System is going to be, again, very analytical, app-based, and it's going to be the most expensive of the 3, probably going to run you around $300 to $400 by the time it's all said and done. So you got to kind of look at your budget. One of the things that I find to be super helpful is get yourself some sort of radar or just kind of pocket-sized launch monitor radar so that you can actually measure your speed. So you can give yourself a baseline in November, and then come January, February, you can actually see how much speed you've increased throughout the wintertime.
And why don't you tell our listeners where you could actually find that device and how much it is?
Yeah, so the radars, you can just hop on Amazon for those. You're going to find one of the most basic ones that you can find is gonna be around $124. Again, Amazon carries that. The one that I got with the Speed Toad, purchased that as a package. That was gonna be a little more expensive because that does actually give you carry distance along with swing speed. So, depends on, again, your budget, what you're looking for. But having those available while you're doing that speed training is going to be key. So we have speed training we do during the winter time. One of the big ones for our teams that we really stress is getting in the gym and doing some sort of weight training. Now, all of our team right now have a weights class in school, and they're doing a really good workout basically 5 days a week in that. There obviously are plenty of workout facilities outside of the school that you can look into as well, but that is a big factor when you're talking about generating club head speed for those younger players, those 14, 15-year-olds, for them to develop that muscle. Weight training is going to be a big factor for that, wouldn't you say, Ted?
It's definitely a big factor in that, and then I think one of the other things that is really important that we do in the winter months, we have player meetings, and during those player meetings, we'll really try to target what we think each individual player needs to work on from a training standpoint over the course of the winter. And the one thing that I love about the off season is here in Indiana, we basically have 4 to 5 months. And if you're trying to make swing changes, this is the perfect time to do it. And it comes with repetition. And even though whether you're just hitting balls inside at a school somewhere into a net with no launch monitors, you kind of you don't get so much focused on ball flight as you really do the mechanics of what you're trying to do with a particular player and what they're trying to change. For example, I've got a player I'm working with right now on our girls team who played pretty well most of the fall, but she has a tendency to hit up on the ball. So what we've been trying to do through a variety of drills and just repetition is trying to get her to hit down on the ball, have her angle of attack be down on the ball, which is going to create more spin, more distance. And I just like the fact that there's no tournament next week, there's no match next week, there's nothing the following month, and you really can, I think, get your students and players to buy into this is a process. This is going to take several months maybe to get it where you need to be. But if you stick with it, you're going to be a lot better player when we start playing outside again in the spring.
That is very true. To kinda go along with that, one thing that we do a lot in the wintertime in that if you don't have the technology, there's so many other things you can do. One of them, we always have our players carry notebooks, kind of stress the importance of having that notebook in your bag, bringing it to your hitting session, whatever it may be, and just writing down some key points. We try to get the players carry distances with our technology. Again, if you don't have that capability, not a big deal. But one of the big things we work on is developing a pre-shot routine. I'll just give an example based on Carson, my son. He's 14, freshman. He has playing experience, but still has obviously developing to do. And we signed him up for this really cool opportunity through the Golf Week Junior Tour. So it's the Winter Golf Week Sim Series, where you can sign up and play in these simulator series with these designated courses against kids all in the cold winter areas. And it's a pretty cool opportunity. But one thing I think it's going to help him do is he just played in one yesterday. And one thing that my husband noticed is that he was really rushing, not doing his pre-shot. Takeaway was a little different on every swing. And so then what we're going to focus on today when he comes to hit after school is going to be getting him into that pre-shot routine, really focusing on slowing that backswing down. Think doing more of a set drill, trying to getting him to feel where his hands and club are out in his backswing, and then just really kind of work off that. So, there's a lot of stuff to do. Pre-shot routine is something that kind of goes overlooked a lot of times in the winter, but it's really a way to develop players and help them.
Well, I think the other thing that using a pre-shot routine for during your winter hitting is it keeps the player from being involved in what I call rapid fire, where they're just, pulling a ball in, firing it into the net, pulling another ball in, firing it into the net. And it's easy to really kind of lose focus of some of the things that you're trying to work on in your swing, tempo being one of them. But we do spend a lot of time during the winter talking to our players about, and we help them develop a pre-shot routine. And I think you and I have talked on these podcasts a lot from time to time about the importance of pre-shot routines. And I think the thing that all of you coaches need to understand is the same player over the course of a season might have several different pre-shot routines based on what's really important and applicable to their game in a particular week. And you can't be afraid to change that pre-shot routine, but at the same time, you've got to be astute enough to figure out what that player might need this week versus 3 weeks from now.
So, pre-shot routine, getting those carry distances indoors if you have access to a launch monitor, even a basic launch monitor, that is going to be a big key for this next transition that we'll talk about, and that is going into the springtime. One thing that can't go overlooked is the club fitting. Do your players have the correct clubs? Now, again, I'll use the younger players as an example. Usually their bodies and their strength, their muscle mass is going to change pretty rapidly when they're in that like 13 to 15 or 13 to 16 age range. So you really need to take a look and see, is their equipment helping them or hurting them?
No, and along those lines too, um, if you're a parent, obviously you want to try to minimize what your costs are going to be if you've got a child who's growing quickly, which happens frequently. And companies like Callaway, for example, have very attractive trade-in programs where if you don't have an immediate buyer for the set of clubs that you're trying to get rid of, if they're Callaway branded, you can trade them in and get a nice trade-in value for it. The other thing you can do without replacing the entire club is possibly order a different shaft and find a club repair person in your area that can basically upgrade the shaft that the player might need, and it would be compatible with the head that they already have, which would save money over buying a full set of clubs.
Right. And make sure you get to a PGA Pro that can get your child fit properly. Obviously, we have the advantage here with the fitting studio, so we can, we have a lot of different shafts available, but I just can't tell you how important it is as your player generates more club head speed and gets stronger to have the correct shaft in the club because that club is going to perform better for them. And again, with my son Carson, we reshafted his clubs one time within a year just because he went from that graphite and then he just got stronger within about a 6 to 9 month period and he was ready for steel shafts. So we saved some costs there and just went ahead and got his clubs reshafted with our local club repair guy. And those clubs have gotten him, through another season. So that's something that you really during the winter need to take a look at. Again, reaching out to your PGA Pro is going to be your best option because they are gonna have kind of that knowledge and hopefully the equipment to get, the club head speed and see what shaft they need best.
Yeah, and I think the last thing, just briefly, we'll mention this, is it's a great time for players to start working on a college resume if they do have aspirations to play beyond high school. And we just did a GPA check this week of our players. Obviously, the off season here in Indiana involves 4 or 5 months, which I think as a coach, it's our obligation if we have players on our team that need work on their GPAs to really try to sit down, have a discussion with them and possibly their parents and see what we can do to intervene and help them find a tutor, whatever the case may be, because I don't care how good a player is, if they've got a substandard GPA in high school, they're going to have a real hard time playing at the next level.
And so that kind of covers briefly, it's kind of a quick rundown of that fall to winter transition here in Indiana. Ted and I, we love the off season because there is so much stuff we can work on that doesn't have the pressure of a tournament coming up. It's really a great time for this long-term development, and don't lose this opportunity as a coach to have this time with your players. It really helps. You're going to find having this wintertime work is going to help in the next transition, which is coming out of the wintertime and getting into the spring.
Yeah, just to kind of give you an example, just a final thought on this whole thing. What Crystal and I did this week is we had our boys call out for 2026. We have a couple of players that are playing winter sports, so they're not available for any kind of work. Indiana, the IHSAA allows us some non-contact time that we can spend twice a week with our players. So what we did was we devised a Monday and Friday hitting schedule where each player's got a bay for 30 minutes and they'll do 30 minutes of speed training and putting work outside of that bay work. So they're getting a couple of hours of structured practice training in over the course of the week. And the more organized that you can be as a coach, I guarantee you the more value your players are going to get out of this.
And we give them very specific hitting times, and we make sure that there are not a lot of people around because the more players that we have around tends to be it's a great social time for them, but it does tend to be less productive because they can get caught up in that social time. So we have no more than 3 players doing their hitting and putting and speed training at one time. And, obviously, we're there as coaches to supervise, and the whole point for us and the whole advantage is that we get to see these players swing. We see their yardages, we see what they're doing with each club, we kinda see their strengths and their weaknesses, and we know their swing. So our next transition is going to be basically from that wintertime, that indoor training, to the outdoor springtime. For us, that's gonna happen right around March, given even when we get out in March, the weather is not nice. Like, it's rainy, it's windy, and it's cold. We're talking, we may be playing in 40, 50-degree weather, rain and wind. So that is a big transition, and that's this next transition we're gonna talk about. How do you transition your players from wintertime indoor training to that springtime transition here, especially for our boys? So let's dig into that, Ted.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're going to share with you today on this podcast is this little clip from the press conference that Adam Schenk, who is from Vincennes, Indiana, had after his PGA Tour win in Bermuda last month. I knew Adam's grandfather, Roy, very well. The Schenk family, uh, as I said, they're from Knox County in Indiana, down around the Vincennes area. But what I think you're going to find interesting about this video is Adam talks about how weather impacts club head speed, how it impacts how the ball comes off the club face, and how it even impacts the speed that you can swing your driver. And it's kind of interesting to hear him talk about how he changes drivers from time to time, whether he's playing in cold weather or warm weather. And I think that we can kind of let this soundbite speak for itself, Crystal.
I generally set up my bag to go straighter. So like my driver, I launch it lower, so I need spin. So I have a lot of speed, kind of created in a little inefficient way. But like if I have to have enough spin, so like the older equipment a lot of time goes shorter for me and it spins more. So that's why I generally set up my bag that way. Or if it's the John Deere Classic and it's 95 degrees, I can swing 124, 125 pretty easily. If you're at Pebble Beach teeing off and it's 52 degrees, good luck. You're not going to be able to swing that same driver that fast. You're going to swing 116, 117, maybe. So, like, that driver setup that you have when it's 95 degrees is not going to perform the same. So, I don't know why. I would say anyone that's a stretch. I'm not going to play the same driver if it's 52 degrees or if it's 95. Like, I'm going to have to make some small change, or I'm going to have to swing the driver that I would play at John Deere significantly different, or I'm going to lose it really, really far right once or twice. And I see it happen a lot early in the mornings, especially when the ball's wet. Like, I feel like the balls nowadays spin a little bit less too. I play an old ball 17V. It spins a little more. So you just, especially when the golf ball's wet in the morning, like it will not draw. It's a lot harder to draw everything nowadays. So that's one reason why the older stuff just draws a little bit easier for me. More spin, less speed. It doesn't go as far, but it works for me. And that's why most of the guys cut the ball here now, I think.
So, Ted, one of the biggest things that I find as coaches we have to help these players with is just with their expectations of you may be swinging 120 or 115 miles an hour in a controlled environment indoors. When you move outside in the spring, you have layers on. It's colder. You are not going to generate that club head speed. So because of that, and because of just not being able to compress the ball as much, you could potentially lose 10 to 15 yards with your driver, depending on weather conditions. And I think for the young high school boys, especially who just want to, distance is a big thing for them, that can be something that they struggle with in the springtime, just moving from indoor to outdoor.
Well, no question about it, and you alluded to this when we talked about what we do inside, is that we do spend time gapping players' irons and focusing on what their carry distance is. That's a great exercise, but we are doing this in a controlled environment inside during the winter, and when they get outside, obviously the ground is softer. As you said, the air is cooler, the ball doesn't carry as far. So those carry distances are certainly probably not going to be applicable for the first part of the season. Then the other thing that I think you see, and we definitely see this in the boys season, is then when temperatures finally do start warming up, and in Indiana it seems like we jump right from winter into summer. And I remember we had a weekend tournament where it was all of a sudden it was almost 90 degrees. And, we had a couple of players who talked about, man, I feel like I just keep over clubbing myself. Well, it's warmer. You're compressing the ball better than you are in cold weather. The ball's carrying more. And so that kind of complicates that aspect of distance. I still get back. I was giving a kid a lesson the other night. He was doing the set drill and he had great timing and tempo. And I said, look, Jack, the key for you is this. Tom Watson always talked about how a secret for him playing well in bad weather was keeping his hands warm. And so any players are going into this transitional time in the early spring in northern climates, the more you can do to keep your hands warm, which does nothing but increase your feel. It gives you better feel with your hands if your hands are warm. Your hands get cold, they start getting a little bit numb. It affects how you grip the club. If you're playing baseball, it affects how you throw the ball. Certainly that case would be true in football if you're playing in the wintertime. So doing anything you can do to keep your hands warm, if it's wearing cart mitts in between shots, if it's putting your hands in your pockets as you're, walking with the bag over your shoulder in between shots, keeping your hands warm and improving your feel will only help you execute better. And it probably help you generate more club head speed.
That is a good point. Can't stress enough how important it is when you're in those climates to have the proper equipment. We stress this to our guys enough, and we're fortunate enough through the Franklin Golf Club to be able to provide pretty good outerwear for the guys. But make sure that your players have what they need. So, a lot of times, like a nice rain suit is going to be key. Having either rain gloves or thermal gloves is going to be key. Having obviously a stocking hat, the hand warmers is gonna be key. So just having that good outerwear is going to be a big factor, and we've seen that come into play in a lot of our tournaments where you can tell the teams that are prepared versus the teams that are not prepared. That's gonna be a big responsibility of the coach to make sure your players are prepared, communicating with the parents, saying this is what the player needs, or being able to provide that through funding.
Well, I think the other challenge you have as a coach is then actually getting your players to wear the outerwear that you provide them. And we get into this with rain suits and rain gear, and we have players that say, "Coach, I can't swing with this jacket on. I can't." Yeah, I just can't do it. And so you're looking at the player and you're thinking, okay, it's better that you're wet and cold and uncomfortable than dry. And so what we actually have done, to the dismay of both our boys and girls teams, is we will make our teams from time to time practice with rain gear on, practice with outerwear on, particularly practicing with rain jackets on, so that when that day comes, it's not like this is the first time that they've ever done that. And I'm just telling you, coaches out there, if you don't do this, you will have players who will not put these jackets on because they've never done it in the past, and they think that it's going to be a detriment to their swing, when we all know all we're trying to do is do them a favor and put them in a position to succeed. But consider making them wear this stuff during practice, your range sessions, even indoors this winter. We'll probably do that with our players this winter, where we'll force them to hit shots in rain jackets.
In that one instance you're talking about stemmed from, I mean, we can tell this story. We won't name names, but you asked the players, you said, bring your rain suits to practice tomorrow. I want everybody to have their rain suit in their bag. And come the next day, we had a player who did not have his rain suit in his bag, like you asked, and again, kind of got back to, I don't like wearing the jacket. And so that is kind of how that came about. The following day at practice, The boys were told to show up wearing their rain suits, and I honestly think it happened to be kind of a warm day that day, so
It
they
was
were
pretty warm.
sweating. So, holding them accountable because they are teenagers, but so we had a good 30 minutes, and all the guys showed up in the rain suits, full-on rain suits, so they putted in the rain suits, and then we went over to the range, and they had a good little, maybe 30-minute practice session in their rain suits.
It gets back to every player taking personal responsibility and doing what is best for the team. And I'm just a firm believer that you can perform better if you stay dry.
Absolutely. So, all to talk in that transition from winter to spring, having the correct outerwear is going to be a key. When we're talking about the biggest difference in kind of hitting and performing, obviously you're going to lose club head speed, you're going to lose distance, carry distance. I think one of the biggest things that you have to focus on when you get outside is the chipping and putting, because chipping and putting indoors, it's good to do the motion and it's good to work on your fundamentals of your stroke, but as far as how the ball responds when it lands, you're really not gonna get that indoors like you would outdoors, and obviously you, Ted, being a golf course superintendent and having that background, you know what the golf course is like in the spring, when it comes to the ball, kinda responding and how the grass is.
Well, yeah, because you're going to get a lot of clumpy lies around the greens in the spring when the grass is still kind of semi-dormant, it hadn't kicked in. You're going to find you've got situations where you got a lot of water between your golf ball and the club face. When you hit those chip shots around the green, that affects how the ball comes off the club face. There's just a variety of things that particularly, no matter what state you're in, the teams that play golf in the spring, you deal with this more than the teams do that play fall golf. So it's a real important part of it because, as you said, during the winter, if you're inside, there's not a lot of really constructive chipping and putting you can do. So we spend a lot of our time in those first few practices outside in March doing just that.
That and hitting shots from the rough, find a spot where you can hit shots from the rough and hitting off of uneven lies. We'll obviously probably delve into that a little closer to the season, but those are just things that you need to plan into your practice routine when you're thinking about the season starting in the spring. And really just being with your players in that winter off season so okay, how much distance are they losing? How is their swing changing from what I saw indoors to outdoors? Is it their tempo? Is it their pre-shot routine? So just as a coach, being with them through those transitional times is going to be really key, Ted. The last transition that we're going to talk about briefly is going to be that transition from summertime individual tournaments to team golf. And I'm going to let you take over because you actually had a little bit of motivation for this.
I did. I want to thank Carl Drummond for his tweet after our last podcast. And basically, this is what Carl tweeted us, Crystal. This is one of the hardest parts of the seasonal transition from summer golf to fall golf for boys. Winning means different things. Laying up versus going for it changes the dynamics of a field stroke play event versus sectionals, etc. Thanks for sharing. And I think that as you and I talked about this, we felt like there was a lot of time probably that needed to be devoted to this topic, and we are going to get into that. The one thing that I would say, you and I attended the Indiana High School Golf Coaches Association conference a year or two ago when Mike Fleck, the men's coach at Ball State, spoke. And Mike talked about charging his players with abiding by what he called the 80-20 rule, which meant the execution of any shot should be based around the fact, can you pull this off 80% of the time? And if you can't pull it off 80% of the time, then you don't try to hit the shot. Particularly, he was talking about second shots, maybe on par fives. But I do think there are some differences between individual and team golf. I think there's some big differences in the pressure that certain players feel. I feel like some of the better individuals who are less inclined to be team-oriented don't feel some of the same pressures that the majority of people who play on teams do because they don't want to let other teammates down. And I think it's an intriguing subject, and it's one that I really want to dive into in some detail. But we encourage our listeners to give us feedback every podcast, and I really want to thank Carl for his thoughts because he kind of triggered how we structured this particular podcast today, and we're going to get into that topic.
Yeah, that'll be an additional podcast. So if you have any other ideas or you just want to give us feedback, you can follow us on social media. Ted and I are both on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can hop on and follow us there. My email is crystal@thelegendsgolfclub.com.
Mine is Ted Bishop 38 PGA at AOL.com.
Please reach out to us, give us feedback. If there's any topics that you want us to discuss as a coach, or if you just need some guidance and resources, we're happy to help you. And we look forward to our next podcast.